Hello, welcome to the Motorsport Review. I am once again and still Perry Brown, your host. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. I am really glad to say tonight, joining me for the first time since the Australian Grand Prix review that I did way back when, is Mr. Andy Donnelly. The reason that I'm doing podcasting, because he obviously got me onto his podcast as a guest and I enjoyed it. So it's his fault if you want to get in the comments of this and blame someone. Crucially, Andy, how are you doing tonight? How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Perry. Yes, definitely blame me. I thought my podcasting days were over when the podcast had finished, but it seems that I get invited on other people's podcasts quite regularly now, so it's quite good. Second time on yours, like you say, since the AusGP, way back in March.
Yeah, you make it sound like I wrote people in.
You do. We all did. It's how it all works.
But the secret is you meant to keep that off the camera. That's the secret payments that I give to everyone. And now Andy's going to be like, hang on, wait, you're paying everyone else?
Yeah. In chocolate oranges.
Chocolate oranges. Yes, that's a story for another time, that one. If they haven't listened, of course, already to the McLaren Fanscast, which they should have done if they haven't. Yes, a little disclaimer that I like to start off with most topics that we cover, if it's not Formula One specifically, myself and Andy, we're obviously fans of motorsport in general, but what we're going to talk about tonight, we might not be the most in-depth knowledged people that you might come across. So if we say something wrong, let us know. We'll try not to. But tonight's topic is one that's been sort of floating around since I've been doing this podcast, bandied about, and it starts way back with yourself, Andy. You were doing Tech Call near Christmas because I was trying to get my first episode up on Apple Podcast. Yeah. And you said to me, do you know what would be really good? You need to talk about DTM at some point and where it's gone and what's happened. And previously spoken about British touring cars as well. And people outside the UK go, what is that? Is that like GT racing? And some people don't really know what BTCC is. And it led me to the question, what is touring cars? What do we think of when you think of touring cars? And crucially, do touring cars have a future when they all seem to be either dying out or becoming GT racing? Now, this is a very open question, Andy.
It is.
I'm going to see if you can lead off.
Let me break it into two parts then. So let me try and answer the first thing of what I think touring cars is. My understanding of it, and like you said earlier, disclaimers, we're here to be educated by people who are more knowledgeable than us if we do indeed get this wrong. So my understanding is touring cars is you are racing cars that are available for the public to buy, that have been modified in such a way that obviously makes them safer for the racetrack, but also faster and a lot more kind of race spec and things like that. So if we take, let's say, for instance, British touring cars, which I watched quite a lot of in the 2000s, which also led me to buying a Civic Type R at that time. A lot of that is, if you think about it, so if we take the Civic for the example, literally it could be that the chassis and the bodywork parts or the look of it are the only things that are carried over from a road car. But in the States of it, the rules are generally they have to be available in some shape or form for the public to buy. I think there was a famous Alfa Romeo years ago, or it could have been Volvo, I'm not sure. Alfa Romeo or Volvo, one of them, where they added a wing at the back with some clips. And because you couldn't buy it from a dealership, it was an extras pack. But it meant that they qualified for touring cars.
I know this one. Yeah, it was Alfa Romeo. And there was no instruction manual, but you bought an Alfa Romeo from the dealership and you opened the boot and there was this kit of parts and you went, right, okay, I don't know what that is. And as you say, they rocked up at touring cars, put this wing, said, no, I bought my Alfa Romeo. This just happened to come with it.
Yeah, but it got them around the rules. And I seem to remember that they upset quite a lot of people because they were actually fast and won races. It's funny, if they hadn't won any races, I'm not sure anyone would have bothered. So yeah, so that's kind of, if we box that as our understanding of what touring cars is, or GT racing or whatever, we'll use the rule of thumb that in some shape or form that car can be bought by the general public, even if it's a runoff of 5 that have out there in production or whatever. And then the second part of your question was, well, what's happening to it? Is it dying off? I think that it might have a bit of a renaissance soon. There's a couple of reasons for that. So it's now becoming a lot more expensive to go and watch F1. It's also becoming very popular to watch F1. And as we know, what happens is that certainly in the past, I believe you can say Nigel Mansell, Jenson Button have all gone into some sort of touring car sort of series after they finished F1 at some point. And that might bring some fans from F1 across. I'm sure at some point, there'll be people who've done F1 and gone to Formula E, then might end up in touring cars when they're a little bit older. That fans may follow. But also, on that point, it's a cheap day out. Can't remember exactly how much. I think the last time I bought a ticket for a race day was 35 quid.
And British touring cars.
British touring cars at Croft. And you go along, there's 3 races on the day of the touring cars. There's a lot of support races. It's really good fun. A lot of motorsport people there. A couple of stands with some tat on and stuff like that where you can buy T-shirts, model cars and everything else. And obviously the obligatory burger vans and everything else like that. But I think people are going to start discovering that as something to go and watch live, and as a day out. I've been lucky enough to go. I've probably been about 10 times to British touring cars over the past 20 odd years, and I keep sort of thinking, I'll go again. It's just not quite worked out. But at Alton Park and Crofton, it's a great place to go, and the facilities are fantastic. So I've got a feeling it might start to come back to be a little bit more popular. On the other side, used to be you can still watch it, but now it's on ITV4, isn't it? So you've got to kind of know that it's there. You're also competing against F1 that's now filling up most of the weekends of the calendar, and a bit of IndyCar as well. It's got people interested. So it's got a lot of competition, but as a day out, I think people might start going to that after they've had a bit of a taste for the F1 and thought, I wonder what else is out there. I think they might be a little bit shooting themselves in their own foot because unless you know about it, you don't know about it. There's never any real hype. There's never any real advertising around it or promotion that I have seen beyond, what you would normally have. So maybe that'll change.
It's definitely a series you have to go and find. Or hopefully you've listened to the Motorsport review and heard me say, oh, it's so good, you have to go and watch it, and you have to go. It's, as you say, a phenomenal experience. People go, pay hundreds of pounds for a Formula One ticket thinking they're going to be mingling with Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris is just going to walk by them and have a chat. And actually the reality is they're over there, you're over there, sit and watch, be happy, and take your £15 hot dog and be happy with your experience.
Yes.
You go to British touring cars, and again, if you've watched like my experience with my daughter, you're just walking around and there's a Tom Chilton, you say to him, look, if I give you this microphone, will you talk to my daughter for 5 minutes? And they're happy to do it, and they're all happy to do whatever. I'm pretty sure if you said to Tom Ingram, like, here's a piece of bread, will you just stuff your face with this piece of, like my personal benefit, just stuff your face with this piece of bread? Pretty sure he'd do it because they're just happy to speak and engage with. He probably wouldn't if he listens to this, he probably wouldn't, but they're just happy to be in and amongst fans and with people that enjoy racing, and it's so accessible, it's so fun, as you say. So certainly in the UK, I think we've got it right, and that's a good jumping off point. British touring cars and British GT, which I've covered as well, the two classes there, I think doing okay in terms of like how they're getting on. Talking to Lucy's been on the show as well, on the podcast before, about that marketing, and it is just ready, isn't it? Touring cars and these series just to step off and actually step into the light and go, we're here, come and enjoy us. But that brings me to the definition that you started with. You hit the nail on the head. So I asked Google about this, and the AI came back and said, look, here's the difference. Touring cars are generally like production ready models, as you said, and they're modified to racing. So there'll normally be a limit, like they have to make 5,000 of them, which rules out your McLarens and your Ferraris because they're like 200, 300 runs at a time. And that's what GT racing is, high end supercars converted to race spec. So again, it's less about adding performance, add the safety, and take out the second seat if it's even got one of those, and take it racing. So it brings us nicely onto where this came about, as I said, about DTM and some of the other series as well that we're going to touch on. I mentioned Super GT last week as well. I said Super GT or DTM were going to be what I covered. And that sort of arena is where I want to bring this discussion. So go back even 10 years, Super GT was doing okay. DTM was doing okay. And I think both of us will say they were in their prime, really. Not in terms of the future, given where we are now, but in terms of what we think of those series and the cars that were racing in them. That was prime, especially DTM, which is where this come from. You had BMW, you had Mercedes, you had Audi, all showing up, all representing their own series of cars. And I think that's how most people like to remember DTM.
Yes, you had the absolutely monster looking Mercedes that were out there in various colors and everything else. I believe around that time I think Paul di Resta was racing as well in DTM. Just one thing to kind of touch on there was one of the reasons that you knew so much about DTM back then was that it was promoted extremely well, not just in Germany but around everywhere else. They actually brought around to the UK for a few years and ran at Brands Hatch.
I went, yeah.
And that's fantastic, and I guess it widens the appeal of the sport and everything else like that. But obviously times have changed, so we can easily just tuck into YouTube and say, DTM, let me watch the last race or something like that. So it's not necessarily sometimes about the live racing anymore in sort of that respect, but the access is there. Once again, I think it's the what cars are actually racing around in sort of DTM at the minute. I couldn't tell you, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I could have done, and I could have probably named a few drivers. Granted, maybe one of them was Susie Stoddard, as she was known there.
Yep.
Then, one of the first F1 races I went to was the Nürburgring in Germany, obviously, and it was I think Lewis won for McLaren. So that's telling you how long ago it was. Yeah. And they had a few DTM cars there as well as a few of the drivers, and they were promoting that alongside the F1. And they didn't have a full race of any sort, but they had some what I would call kind of like hot laps, I guess you call them now. So it was interesting. Yeah, and these things sounded amazing, and you're like, oh, it could be interesting to come back and watch that. But yeah, and it was very heavily Mercedes based at that point. So so it's one of those things, isn't it, where you just I honestly thought that it had finished as a series until I looked it up a few days ago. That's how little I'd heard about it. So I don't know, what's your kind of experience around DTM? Obviously, you've been to France to see it and things like that. Do you think it would benefit from coming back to the UK?
Yes and no. Yes, like any series that can get abroad, and they do go to Place like Zandvoort, I think, is on their current calendar. So they do venture outside of Germany. I think that's crucial for any series that wants to grow, is at least put one round elsewhere and maybe rotate that. So again, British GT did a round at Spa, which people would go, that doesn't make any sense, but it does, because you live near Belgium, you know Spa, you think, what's on this weekend? You see British GT and think, what's that about? And it's £20, you go along. And then you go, well, I'll watch a series, it's on YouTube. And so I think it's really important to do that. As you say, that cross promotion could be done better in that regards. If you think of Formula One at Silverstone, I bet there wasn't a touring car or British GT car around. So yeah, get DTM cars around. The bigger question I'd have is, I feel like it's lost its identity. And as you say, like, you weren't sure it was around. Like, you used to look at the Mercedes, the BMW, you know, they were racing M5 and 4 models, I think, the CLK 63, you know, these were like cars that on the road are just for executives and salesmen, and suddenly they're racing, and you looked at it and straight went, oh, it's a DTM car. Now, as you say, they are racing. It's things like the AMG GT, which you look at and go, no, that's a GT car. It's Ferrari not 458s, they're old, 488 possibly. But yeah, all GT3 cars, Porsches, yes, they're German, but they're GT cars. Then they're race cars anyway. You don't look at it and immediately know. Yeah, exactly. And you could look at a 911 GT3 RS race, well, the race variant of, and go, do you know what? Without looking at the sticker panel on the side, I don't know if it's a DTM car or a wet car or an IMSA, you know, spec car, because it means very little different at that point. So
if I just jump in there, if we go back to the point that I made earlier, that, you know, I could buy a Honda Civic that looked like the Honda Civic that was getting raced around the track. Whereas, you know, what I'm trying to say is that the touring cars were kind of much more of an affordable type of car. Even if we take Mercedes as an example, as you've used there, in the UK, in British touring cars, I seem to remember there was the Halfords liveried Mercedes A classes, which were, you know, quite you know, they were a sporty A class, but you were like, oh, you know, that's quite a nice car. I could end up buying one of them, which I did. So, you know, you kind of get that kind of thing, but I couldn't watch, you know, a Porsche 911 GT3 going around the track and think, oh, you know, that would appeal to me as an enthusiast of cars, let's just call mine. You know, I know I can't afford that straight away. So I think you're right. I think there's a blurred line there, isn't there, of what they actually are racing and what is a touring car and what is actually a GT, and has it now just become a series for manufacturers just to put their high-end sports cars in as as advertising, essentially, I guess.
And I think that's ultimately where this is going to boil down to, is what the manufacturers want to do. Because it's probably much easier for them to go and set up a race division, say at Mercedes, and go, you see that AMG GT, very fast performance car, can we take that racing? Yeah, we'll bolt a wing on it, I guess, and maybe put a bit of a floor on it and some racing tires, and it's good to go. Whereas if they go, you see that CLK C63, can we take that racing? Go, oh my god, really? Like, I've got to strip that out, I've got to take all of the things out, the engine's not powerful enough, I'm gonna have to change the engine. So I think manufacturers are more open to GT race, especially if they're looking at going racing. The likelihood is they've got a performance car that they can go racing with, so it makes more sense. And unfortunately, I feel like that's the watered down world or answer that this is going to get to, that it's ultimately it's going to be money, which is funny when we're sat here, and you've hit the nail on the head with the production series, that you're sat there as a fan going, Porsche 911 G, yeah, okay, I know I already wanted one of those and I know I can't afford them, but around these parts in Shrewsbury, I believe it is, there's a Chevrolet Cruze which still goes around in full Silverline British touring car livery. And I love that, because I used to love that car, and I nearly bought one. a few years ago, everyone told me I was nuts. Why on earth would I buy a Chevrolet? And I didn't end up getting one, but I nearly bought one just because of British touring cars.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And I think there's like one other little aspect that we've not quite touched on here. If we're going to go around, if we're concentrating for this point of the podcast more on the European side of it, because I know we're going further afield soon. But also super licenses. So now F1, you need a super license. You need so many points, so many things qualify for it. Now I remember that you know drivers that used to win DTM had a chance of an F1 seat or an F2 seat at least. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore. They don't seem to accrue the points that they need or what to get a super license. So I wonder if that's kind of not helped in any sort of way, shape, or form. And what I mean is that you hear when a seat's coming up. So we're just about to get into what you call silly season in F1, aren't you? So there's always a driver that's in IndyCar. Are they going to come and join that? Or there's a driver in F2 or F3 or something like that. You hardly ever hear about there's somebody in DTM or WEC or something like that that's done well enough to get this, because the route just doesn't seem to be there anymore. It seems closed off, which is a bit of a shame because in the past some good drivers have come from those areas, and some absolutely terrible ones as well. Let's just balance it out.
Yes. You make a really good point there about drive. You made it early, actually. I meant to come back to this. It's something I hadn't thought about the growth of touring cars in the drivers that are currently racing in Formula One, like the Lando Norrises, when he gets done with F1, eventually you might find he goes, or Max Verstappen. Let's talk about Max Verstappen, because there's obviously the rumor going around a lot that he might go GT3 racing, and everyone going, get behind that, because he's got his own team. And I think he's, as I say, he's already starting to build a growing in GT3, even though he's not done anything other than start the team, but just already growing that following by potentially going over there. So yeah, it has become more of a retirement home rather than a development. But it brings me to the name Sho Suboi. So when I was looking this up, I was looking up Super GT, as I say.
Yeah.
And I saw this name as the reigning champion. I was like, that name rings a bell. And looked into it, and it says reigning Super Formula champion as well. And I was like, that's nuts. That's crazy to me, because what you're dealing with there is like the equivalent of finding out that the current DTM champion is the reigning Formula 2 champion, and that he did both, he or she did both in the same season. But that's what Japan's lined up. There's so many drivers that do both series. And I was really surprised that more Super Formula drivers, as you say, haven't made their way across. I forgot his name. I meant to look up his name, but he won the 2023 Super Formula Championship, went over to Formula 2 with Rodin, and I think has then since gone into GT racing, possibly himself. I can't remember his name. I'm going to have to find it and put it in the notes afterwards. But yeah, there's a plethora of drivers that are out there that are racing in these series, or racing in DTM. Jack Aitkins of the world that have merged, have been right on the cusp of getting into Formula 1 full time. I know he did that one race, but they're there. He's I believe leading the championship after this weekend in DTM, and it has happened. Alex Albon was another notable name for DTM as well. Has now got into F1, but it's a very viable pipeline. We need these series to keep producing races, and for not just to see like your Mika Häkkinens who went to DTM after Formula 1, not to see them just go over there, retire, and plump up the numbers over there, but to come through from them and do it the other way around.
I think the other kind of thing we can add to that is that if these things were more of a feeder series or something like that, I think you'd start to see a lot more females in those arenas as well. Now, we have had a few drivers that have driven in sort of British touring cars and DTM and stuff like that have made a name for themselves. But it is a bit like F1, where it's very few and far between. and yeah, you know, it would be nice to see. I think you've got in certainly in the wet and the GT sort of things, Iron Dames,
Iron Dames, yeah.
yeah, fully female team, female mechanics and everything else, which is great. But if I'm hand on heart, they shouldn't really need to exist. They
shouldn't need to, no.
Yeah, you know,
I know what you mean.
Absolutely amazed what they're doing, and I'm absolutely behind it. But really, it would be better if they didn't need to exist, and it was more likely that the female talent that's out there, could come through. And also on the other side of that, this is kind of almost all, you know, we talk about drivers a lot, but there are engineers, there are race strategists, there are you know, performance engineers, and also you know, fitness trainers and everything else, all in all of these smaller sort of racing arenas and stuff like that, that can make their way up, male or female. And you know, it shouldn't just be looked at as a place for a driver to come through to F1 if we're using F1 as the pinnacle of motorsport as a definition here. You know, there's plenty of talent in there, and it should be, and I'm sure teams must look at them and look at these places for people to come through. Yeah, so yeah,
and it goes even further than that as well. When you think of the FIA, again, promoting their own, we get a new race director every 6 months or so in Formula One, and they go, every 6 races, and they come in and they go, oh, this is the old race director from WEC, something like that. So that, again, these other series get other drivers, and I'm sure there's Hankook engineers and people working on tires in DTM that then get pulled across to Pirelli and then get told, right, you're now going to work in Formula One. So it's everywhere. You know, the more series that there are, whatever level, whatever competition or whatever type of racing, more is better, to get more people in, more people involved, and ultimately, you know, fans through gates, because by getting fans through gates, you get potential people that are going to then become those engineers and those mechanics as
more
well.
Sponsors, so more money in the sport, more recognition, more coverage, but ultimately you need to get the fans through the gates first. That's really it. Or the fan engagement, let's call it these days, because it's not just fans through the gate these days. It's showing our age there, Harry.
Do you know what? I'm just going to say, this is quite nice to have someone opposite me that's actually a bit older. But it's normally me that gets that comment. I normally sit here and go, all right, yeah, okay, I'm older. But it's nice. That's to change it. That's why you got invited.
You remember the old days? Yeah. I remember it was just an airfield, not a racing track. Yeah.
So sorry about that. Your pay's just gone up two chocolate oranges. So yes, we just need to convince manufacturers, really. I think that these series, these touring car series, are worth doing. I think that's ultimately what's going to prove their survival. And yeah, as you say about fan engagement, like, we might not be going to DTM. We probably, you know, it sounds like, did you go to DTM in the past? Did you say you went to the DTM to watch it as well, like I did?
No, I didn't. Brands Hatch is a real slog for me to get to.
Yeah.
From here. So yeah, but it was back when you could actually watch some of it on TV and stuff. So
I've actually found that a lot with this podcast, because a lot of times when I go, this weekend I'm going to watch, like I sat down to do this weekend Super GT, and I thought, oh, I'll get that on YouTube, and I looked up and the last race was fully there, and I thought, okay, this weekend's will be shown live, and it wasn't there this morning, and I was like, don't know how I'm going to do a podcast episode on it. Hence why it's grown into a bigger question, going like, how are these series surviving? Because just put the races on YouTube where they're easy to get to. And one of the biggest wins was the Rolex 24, because the whole thing was shown all 24 hours live on YouTube, and you can still go back therefore and watch the whole thing if you want to as well. So yeah, I think not only is it getting people there, but actually making it available to watch. It sounds daft, doesn't it? But again, Formula Academy, F1 Academy had this problem when it first started. People going, this is very good. As I said about females in motorsport, this is all very good. And if I'm there at the track, I can see them, but they're not on TV. I can't even give you money to show them. Like, put them on TV. Get the cameras are there working, surely, rather than just announcing "well done" to Maya Vurgu, whoever won the race. Congratulations. Actually, show the racing. So I think a lot of these series going behind the paywall is also stifling any kind of interest, and probably ultimately did for DTM when it's swapped over to these new GT regulations. World Touring Cars was another series I looked at, because like you, when you said about DTM, you thought DTM had folded. I looked at World Touring Cars, like, no, I remember that series. What happened to it? So 5 minutes down the pipeline, I saw World Touring Car Championship that I knew became WTCR, World Touring Car Cup, I think it was, from 2018 to 2020, 2022, and then folded. So there's another touring car series that went under, and you go, probably because it just wasn't available to watch, didn't have the interest, and they went, no, pull the plug.
It's very unlikely Netflix are going to make a drama documentary about any of them either, to give the sort of them a bit of a boost. But yeah, I think that's the thing. People don't buy magazines like the Motor Run Weekly or Sport or anything like that as much as they used to. In fact, where you would get a bit of a review of these things and kind of go, oh, all right, okay, I recognize that name because they were in or around Formula One or Formula Two for a while, and you'd look it up and stuff like that. But yeah, certainly, it's almost kind of, it almost feels like there's a big transition in motorsport around the world about how these things are going to happen. But I do feel like one of the biggest factors is the increased number of races in F1 is saturated. So your free weekends now are a lot less. Are you going to go and watch another motorsport event? Sometimes you might. Generally, if you're lucky enough to have a wife, then she'll probably want to take you shopping down Primark or something like that. But at least this summer, McLaren gear now. Anyway.
It was Cheshire Oaks this weekend, but moving on. Right? I don't know how you knew that.
Yeah.
To be fair, I bought more than she did, but moving on. If she's listening, I love you very much.
They're selling McLaren merch, so I'd expect nothing less.
Two shops.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to touch on sort of Australian Supercars V8s, or have you got anything else on?
No, I do, because again, it's another series I've covered, I've watched on this series and gone, like, it's in a good place, but again, at the moment, it's still Ford versus Chevrolet, GM, and again, I was watching it thinking, this isn't what I knew it as. It used to be Ford Falcons, Holden Commodores.
Yeah, and it was a great rivalry. So, I'm no expert again, but in the early days, I sound like back in the day. So I'm lucky enough to have family in Australia. So I've visited Australia and watched the F1 there a few times. So if we go back to 2012, you used to go and watch the F1, and they'd actually have a round of the V8 supercars there as well. But they'd run that on a different day to the F1 race, which is, ideal. So the earlier days in the sort of, so I think they'd run the races on the Saturday, but then have a exhibition race on the Sunday. And back then it was still Holden versus Ford. And obviously Holden were General Motors or Vauxhall in the UK, Opel around Europe, etc., in the US. So, but it was a rivalry. When you spoke to people, they were one or the other. It's Ferrari versus McLaren. It's that kind of level of things. It's sort of a deep history of not hatred. Rivalry is a better word. Over the barbecue with a few tinnies, watching the racing at Bathurst and stuff like that. Now that's definitely a bucket list track that I want to go to at some point. But that suffered as well from manufacturers. So obviously Holden dropped out. GM discontinued the brand. and everything else like that. So they didn't race that anymore. So you kind of lost a bit of that then. You lost a bit of the kind of almost tribalism of it. But
it's the identity, isn't it, of the series?
Is the identity. So what two things that caught me out. I wasn't expecting it to be as big as it was at an F1 event. It was massive. People were there to watch that rather than the F1.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah.
Saturday, they had a ticket for that. The F1 qualifying was a bonus that I would say maybe 60% of the touring car fans stayed around for. A lot of them just went home when the touring car thing had finished. And like in the UK, you know, they have some great drivers and stuff like that. But I distinctly remember watching it, thinking, "Oh, I wonder what this is all going to be like." And then there was like 6-car pileup on the first corner. They'd stopped the race it stopped everything on the track for 45 minutes. There's like cars on the roof and everything else like that. And it was just because somebody had gone, do you know what? I'm just going for this. You know, true Aussie style, just, it'll be great. Straight steaming into the first corner, took everybody out, the whole lot. But it was great to watch. I'll just say at this point, everybody was fine. Nobody was hurt, nothing like that. But so we want a bit of entertainment, a bit of stuff like that. And it was great fun to watch. The other thing that they would do on a race weekend in Australia was like a performance challenge.
Oh yes, yeah.
So they'd take a road car. So let's take, for instance, it was a C63 Mercedes. They'd take a Holden V8, and at that point they were taking the Red Bull RB6 or something like that, one of the V10s, driven by Coulthard.
Yeah, they had to keep Coulthard busy, didn't they? I was going to say, I remember him doing this a lot.
Yeah. What they'd do is they'd set off the road car first, and they'd let that get halfway around the track. Then they'd set off the V8, and they'd let that get like about a third of the way around the track, or something like that, or a good way around the track anyway. Then they'd set off the F1 car while the other cars were, well on the back straight. And literally, when they got it timed right, and they do this same thing over like 4 or 5 times over the weekend, this same exhibition thing, to the point where all 3 of the cars were crossing the line at the same time. And it was amazing how fast. It really gave me a feeling of how fast F1 cars were compared to normal cars, because there's this guy hooning it around in the Mercedes AMG, going faster than me and you could ever dare to drive, and literally making it look like somebody out for a Sunday drive in a sort of Kia Picanto.
And I was gonna say you'd have, so the driver in the V8 supercar wasn't just anyone either. It'd be like a Mark Winterbottom or a Mark Winterbottom, a Jamie Whincup or something like that.
Yeah,
believe you me, that driver, whoever that was, Jamie. Let's say it was Jamie Whincup. He wants to beat David Coulthard. He wants to make a point. Although they're saying you're going to get beaten, he wants to get out there and do a lap that's quick enough that he's going to beat that F1 car. And then probably like a burnt Mylander in a Mercedes or something like that, who raced in DTM. Again, that was one of the names I had, burnt Mylander, as being a DTM racer. So again, this cross-pollination of GT races and touring car drivers and getting them over to F1, that's where our current safety car driver came from.
Craig Loudon's. He did a few of them. Like you said, Jamie Whincup as well. And what's the name of the lad that's was in F1 that his dad used to be in DTM?
People like that, aren't they?
Mick Doohan drove V8 supercars.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. It wasn't a name that came up when I looked up.
Yeah. So he was.
Excellent.
Yeah. So he drove a few of them. So, it was entertainment more than anything, wasn't it? So, but that could be a way that they could do things over here. Get a British touring car. Get a just don't grab somebody off the street with their AMG, but get somebody in there. Get an old F1 driver in the AMG. Get a touring car driver. Get Tom Ingram to do it. stick DC in his old RV.
I was going to say, he's
Send
still
them
about
around
his dual
Silverstone
drive.
and do that, and that would be great. Fans would sit and watch that. So,
They absolutely would. I mean, this weekend didn't go admittedly, and it did look really good. It was like the Silverstone Festival, Silverstone Classic. I can't remember.
yeah,
I think it used to be called the Silverstone Classic. And again, I think it's about showcasing different series that are out there. So there'll be like historic F1 cars that were going around, and probably historic touring cars. But this is really, as you talk about, like a mix and showing those different cars together at the same time. Even Goodwood separates them into classes and runs them individually. So yeah, it'd be good to see something like that come back, and yeah, just really help touring cars become a thing again, because I don't want to see them die out. I don't want, like, I've got nothing against GT racing. I have enjoyed it when we've covered it, but there's something more romantic to me about taking a car that should not be on a racetrack and putting it on a racetrack. And as I say, I watched Super GT this weekend, and every time I saw the Honda Civic come past that looks like a bus from the side, it's so long, it's so tall, and I thought it just doesn't belong. But it was out there, it was racing, and especially they put Arta, the sponsor of it, across the back windows just to make it look even bigger. You know, the bit you can normally see through, and it's just more advertising, sponsorship, boarding. Yeah, I want to see more touring cars, not less. So yeah, hopefully the manufacturers get on board. If you're like looking for another series, then I'd implore you to go and find a touring car series near you. There's series that I want to cover, like Brazil stock cars and things like that. Again, they're just Toyota Corollas. We've got one on our drive, so to see one in race trim, you look at it and go, I want to see that race. I have no idea what Brazilian stock cars like, but as soon as I see the race version of a road car, I'm like, I want to see what that's like, because to me it's insane. Seeing, even as a McLaren fan, I'm sure you're the same, seeing a McLaren race, it's kind of like, well, that's what it's been made to do the day it was conceived as an idea.
And just on that point, just looking at the calendar, we've got next weekend, Donington Park, British Touring Cars. 20th of September to the 21st, Touring Cars at Silverstone. 4th of October, the 5th of October, Brands Hatch. So there's a couple of, basically, if you live in the Midlands down south of the UK, there's 3 race meetings that should be easy enough for you to get to.
There you go. And we're going to get commission now from British Touring Cars for advertising it. Yes.
Yeah.
So to sum up, it's a shame to see DTM go the way it has. I think I put this up on threads quickly before, and most people said, yeah, I love DTM, preferred it before, and I think we're both of the same mindset. Super GT, I'm happy with where it is. I don't want to see it become a GT, like, although it says Super GT, I count it more as touring cars. It's like Japanese touring cars, so I'm gonna put it under the touring car umbrella. I don't want to see that lose its identity as well. And yes, although more racing's the same, I want to see Australian supercars do well, and I just want to see more touring car series in general. So yes, if you're about and looking for something to get into, then find a touring car series. Definitely highly recommended. Andy, thank you very much for coming on and
no worries,
talking about just everything and anything, your experiences of Australian Grand Prix, being called old countless times, pretending that we're best friends, and after this you losing my number. So thank you very much.
Harry who? Eh?
That's what my family
seriously, if you're out there and this is your bag, drop us a line. I'd love to know more about it. What's your experience has been? What have you seen? What do you miss? What do you miss about the old days? You know, have you actually bought a touring car after it's been decommissioned?
That is a great question. I'm going to put a poll on. I don't normally do that. I'm going to put a poll on, say, have you bought a touring car, like a production version of? That's a great question. Andy, thank you so much.
No worries. We'll speak to you again soon.
I'm sure you will. We'll get you back on, I'm sure. Another chocolate orange in the post going your way. Yes, please do get involved. Please get in the comments. Let me know. And next week will be the Zandvoort Grand Prix, the Dutch Grand Prix race review. So I'll no doubt rope someone else in with chocolate oranges to come and talk to me about that then. So until then, goodbye and all the best.
Yeah.